Hello, how's everyone doing today? It's been a really long time since I've done one of these. Sorry about that. Today I'm going to do a movie review, actually. Bug, it's called. Maybe I have to show it like this. I don't know. Bug on DVD. I still buy DVDs. I don't care what anyone says. I can watch it whenever I want. I like physically owning them. Anyway, Bug came out 2006, starring Ashley Judd and Michael Shannon, directed by William Friedkin. The film was totally mismarketed, so it's pretty obscure. And it was marketed as this horror film about bugs that attack you. But the film is, I would consider a horror film, but it's really a psychological film. It's about a war veteran who is a paranoid, who believes that there are these very small microscopic bugs eating him alive, and that the government implanted the egg sac where the bugs grow in his body somewhere, and he falls in love with this girl who just came out of an abusive relationship, and played by Ashley Judd, and she's really alone, and her kid disappeared, and they fall in love, and he's able to convince her that there are bugs eating both of them, and she shares in his delusion. And it's really about codependency and psychological abuse and isolation and paranoia disguised as a horror film, and it's really, really good. And I want to talk a little bit about the film and why I think it's so interesting and important. So in the film, first of all, if anyone has met these conspiracy theory type anarchists, like the lizardtarians, who, like Alex Jones types, you'll relate a lot to this film, because he has the character has all sorts of ridiculous conspiracy theories. And so anyway, Ashley Judd plays this character who just came out of an abusive relationship by this guy who beats her and is physically abusive. And when she meets this guy, Peter, played by Michael Shannon, who is psychologically abusive, but not intentionally so. He's just a paranoid, right? He's not like an evil guy. He's just a paranoid guy. And he's able to convince her of his paranoia that there are these bugs that exist, but they exist in our head. And then, he talks about how the government put it there, and she's able to share in his conspiracy. And there are a few interesting points about the film that I really like. One is how the biggest enemy is this: our own brain, our own head is our worst enemy. That even though the Michael Shannon character blames the government or the bugs for destroying his body, the only thing that's really destroying him is his own head and his own paranoia. That there's nothing inherently wrong in the outside world that's hurting him. The only thing that's really destroying him is his head. There's an excellent book. I didn't read it, but I like it based on the title alone. I hope to read it. There's a book that came out called Whatever Makes Your Brain Happy, You Should Do the Opposite. And the basic point of the book is that how your brain responds very positive to stimuli in the short term, but it doesn't really think long term. So, you can be highly impulsive and make all these reckless decisions for instant gratification but that later on are not going to appeal to you. So your brain can really be your own worst enemy. And I think what's fascinating about this film is that how your own brain and your own paranoia can be your own worst enemy. Another thing that I really like is that the contrasting of the two men in the Ashley Judd character's life, one who is physically abusive and the other one who's just a paranoid. And what's really interesting is that how the paranoid guy is really worse. So this film does an amazing portrait to show how psychological abuse can really be far worse and more insidious than physical abuse, because you recognize physically abuse as abuse. She recognizes her ex as abusive. She considers Peter not abusive. The very end of the movie, she says, "I love you," after their lives are pretty much destroyed. And I'm not going to say how, but Peter basically gets her to believe in this paranoia thing. So I think that was really interesting, how the movie shows really well how psychological abuse can be more insidious than physical abuse. And another thing is that I really like about the movie is how being isolated and alone makes you more vulnerable to succumb to your paranoia thoughts. Because when you first meet Peter, he seems a little off, but his paranoia, I think, is kept relatively in check because he doesn't have a vessel on which to confirm his paranoia, right? I mean, one of the things that I think makes his paranoia worse is that he's in a relationship with someone who's a codependent, and they each bring out the worst in each other, right? So if I have these paranoid delusions and I meet someone who's a sycophant or someone who's just gullible and agrees with me, my paranoia is going to become worse, because they're going to be, you're right, you're right, you're right. Oh my God, my paranoia is right? You mean you're telling me I'm right? So that makes it worse. But if I have other people who are like, no, these are just negative thoughts in your head, no, you're paranoid, no, these things don't exist, then the paranoia can become relatively in check. And the vast majority of the movie takes place just in one hotel room, and it really shows how being isolated and cut off from the rest of society, and how by being with a partner who is willing to just embrace your delusion feeds it and makes it worse. And it makes it keep growing and keep growing and keep growing until it destroys everything you're awake. So I think that Bug, I'll show the DVD cover one more time. Bug is really an excellent film showing, and a very intelligent film showing and exploring loneliness, paranoia, and codependency in a really interesting way, with great visual sets and really great, funny dialogue and conspiracy theories in a very black comedic way. And the acting is really good. I mean, there's, I think, 5 characters in the whole film. The vast majority of the film is basically 2 characters. So it's really a character piece, and I really think it's worth buying, in my opinion, because I like watching it more than once, but worth checking out. And I did not like The Exorcist at all. So I pretty much had very low expectations because I didn't like The Exorcist. And this is based on a play by Tracy Letts, who did August Osage County, which I hated. He also did Killer Joe, also directed by William Friedkin, which I liked. I like Bug more, but Killer Joe is an entertaining film too. It's sort of a Coen Brothers Noir type movie. But so I didn't have high expectations going in about this film. But it really surprised me with its intelligence and with its really feeling to create very an unnerving sense. So if you like psychological thrillers and intelligent psychological thrillers, I highly recommend checking out Bug. All right. See you hopefully in less than another 10 months. Take care. Bye.